Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm back. Thank you all for joining me for the beginning of season 5 of Black Writers Read. My name is Nicole Young Martin, and I'm the founder, producer, and host for the series. I'm so excited to share with you before we get started this afternoon a quick sneak peek into season 5. I'm stretching the definition of writer to look at narrative construction. We start the season off today talking about poetry, and we'll end season 5 on Juneteenth in 2025, chatting with a documentary filmmaker. I'm so excited. We'll be hosting several live podcast events in Western Mass and Northern Connecticut region, which they will be recorded and the audio will go on the audio podcast. We'll be hosting some in-person book clubs. I think I'll be doing a couple of virtual book clubs. And then also I'll be bringing back some past guests to talk about their newest work. Like, for example, I'm hosting Tracy Cross to talk about her second book on October 5th. I hope that y'all all had a chance to check out the audio podcast over the summer, as there were some great bonus episodes, including my chat with Clarence Divine I. Macklin, one of the actors from A24's recently released film Sing Sing, which I hope that y'all had a chance to see it. And there's a few more special episodes forthcoming this season, two in particular, where I had a chance to chat with a fellow podcaster about some important to the culture film and television adaptations of books. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the audio podcast, as I'll continue posting exclusive content there. You can find Black Writers Read in the audio podcast space wherever you get your catalog of podcasts. So let's get today's conversation started. Black Writers Read showcases, celebrates, and honors the word, works, and traditions of Black writers from across the country, across genres, across experiences, and across the African diaspora. Black Writers Read is a behind-the-scenes conversation into the craft and what it means to create as a Black author in today's society. Since starting the series during the summer of 2020, we've hosted almost 70 authors representing 10 plus genres from 4 countries and 17 states. Our platform includes the live stream interviews, the audio podcast, book clubs, and curriculum development assistance. Find us online at blackwritersread.com. Today, we welcome Yael Valencia Aldana, the recipient of the 2024 Pushcart Prize for Poetry. Yael Valencia Aldana is an award-winning poet and writer. She is the author of the poetry collection Black Mestiza, which we'll talk about today, and the chapbook Aliens, which was published by Bottlecap Press in 2023. She's a Pushcart Prize winner, and her work has been widely published, among others. She teaches creative writing at Florida International University and is the managing editor of Purple Ink Press. She lives in Florida near the ocean with her son and too many pets. I don't know about that. We might be neck and neck. Today's conversation will feature Yael's forthcoming poetry collection, Black Mestiza, scheduled for release in January of 2025. So just FYI for folks, how we discovered each other. I was scrolling on Instagram, saw the cover of her forthcoming book, and I was like, oh my God, this looks really good. Then I Googled her and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then I messaged her on Instagram, and that's how I was able to bring her on. I love this book so much, and I cannot wait to discuss it with all of you. And Black Mestiza, Yael Valencia Aldana, reckons with her identity as a Caribbean Afro-Latinx woman with indigenous Black and white roots and pays homage to the legacy, resilience, and fortitude of her ancestors. These stunning poems paint a vivid picture of everyday life and Aldana's experience as a mixed-race woman, daughter, and mother. The Pushcart Prize-winning poem, Black Person Head Bob, oh my God, I cannot wait to hear it, addresses how Black people excuse me, silently yet soulfully acknowledge and see each other. Why Don't You Write About Joy acknowledges the suffering that women of color endure while their cries and spirit remains resolute. Because you cannot hear me doesn't mean I am not singing. I need to get that as a tattoo. Small, dark, and moving skillfully represents the poet's journey and the souls she carries with her, evoking images of evolving landscapes and beings as they transform through different forms. The poet beautifully interweaves narratives regarding the constant presence and influence of her Caribbean parents and a desire for more connection with her Colombian grandmother and ancestry, capturing the essence of origins, blood ties, and the idea that nothing is ever truly lost. This collection is not only a testament to Aldena's deep rooted connection to her heritage, but a compelling celebration of an expression of pride, recognition, and a profound sense of community. To learn more about Yael and her work, please visit her website at yaelaldana.com. Throughout her time reading, I'll be sharing all of her deets so that you can be in touch with her Instagram and her website. For those of you who are new to Black Writers Read, here's the format. Yael will read an excerpt from her work and then we'll chat. If time remains at the end of the conversation, we'll open it up to Q&A with those who are joining us today. We typically have viewers joining us from both Facebook and YouTube. If you have a question, please feel free to include it in the comments section on the platform where you're joining us from today. I will compile the questions and either pose them to our guests or to following the conversation or insert them during an appropriate time during our chat. I'd now like to bring Yael onto the virtual stage. Hello.
Hi there. I'm so excited to
Yeah.
be. Thank you so much.
Yes, I'm so excited to finally have you on. And thank you so much for offering to kick off season 5.
I know. What an honor. And that blurb that you read about my book was written by my press, Kentucky Press. They did a really
Yeah,
good job. I'm like, oh,
they
that
did
sounds
such a
good.
great job. Yeah, I
Um,
snagged it. I was like, this is beautifully written.
I know. I really lucked out with them, and with you coming across me on Instagram. So I am really thrilled to read for you guys some of the poems from the book, and I'm going to start with.
So I'll officially turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to start with Black Person Head Bob. Black Person Head Bob. I am the dream and hope of the slave, Maya Angelou. I still count. How many of us are in here? 5, 6, 2, including me. Why? Are we going to fight somebody? Our backs against their gilded walls? Have we made progress? We made it yet? If we stare too long, sometimes we head bob. I see you, you see me. I see you, a woman on a Philadelphia street. I stare for half a second too long. You stare for half a second too long. Your houndstooth jacket, just so. Your gray hair, just so. Like my mother would have done. You see me. We do not speak. We pass a silent, go on, girl, as we cross. She is cleaning the university bathroom in her blue uniform. She sees me. I see her. We head bob. We do not speak. Pass a silent, go on, girl, as we cross. I asked my colleague, 24 to my 44, do y'all still count how many black people are in the room? Do y'all still hold each other's gaze half a second too long? I see you, you see me. I got you, you got me. Or is that old woman stuff, old black woman stuff I learned from my mother? I saw you, he says. I counted you, he says. I got you, you got me. For our ancestors below the sea, from our ancestors across the sea. I see you, you see me. Next, I'm going to read Talisman, which is opens the poetry collection. And really, this poem is what the whole collection is about in one. Talismans. I made a new talisman that is both necklace and conjuring. It is of you and of them and of me. Your initials in scrolled shiny silver rests on my neck. My mother, your name means blood, namesake, origins. We are of the Caribbean. Our names mean salt water in the veins, buried navel strings. You are recently dead. And what of them? Ancestors. The word means namesakes, origins, blood. Means nothing is lost. Means the Western world meets the New World, which was not new because people were already there. They have been dead for centuries, dragged to the bottom of the sea on the Middle Passage in chains, dragged to the bottom of the sea for gold, for silver, on the galleon La Nuestra Senora de Atocha, on the Guineaman, the Hannibal, dragged out of the green dome mountains of Santa Marta, Colombia, before it was Santa Marta, before it was Colombia. I wear their coin around my neck next to your initials, a coin dredged from their island under the sea, waterlogged graveyard of Colombian gold, of Caribbean silver. I wear their coin for ancestors who slipped past conquistador steel to peer gold rimmed around narrow sloped Santa Marta peaks, for the ones that got caught and broke under Spanish yokes, under British yokes. I wear their coin for the ones doing the catching, for the ones that came from Scotland with money, for those that came from Aldana, Spain for money, for those that came from Valencia, Spain for money, their riches dragged down into shipwreck soaked sodden sands, lost before reaching Spanish coffers, before reaching English coffers, for me to find and put around my neck. Mother, no men stay in our family. They keep on going, leaving beautiful, dusky, sometimes dark skinned, sometimes half cased children in their wake. All of you curl in my ear. I will carry you. Sleep in my mestiza's body. Lay aside the violence that forged this body, my body. Lay inside my shell of soul and flesh. We are all in here together, distilled into this one casing of corpuscles. Sleep in my husk of flesh and soul. I will carry you. So this next one is called We Are Very Witchy, and it was inspired by a conversation that the author, Sandra Cisneros, had with another author, Ruth Behar. We are very witchy. We make altars in glittering blue and white mosaics with plaster skulls and black and white photographs. We burn candles. We clutch our talismans. The gold embossed cross around your conquistador neck, the hammered silver cross around your English neck, pictures of stark, dour grandmothers, money from absent and dead grandfathers. Ancestors come to the fore. My mother and I call you, all of you, from your islands beneath my sea. This is how we burn, next to stiff white Anglican prayer books, next to Methodist prayer guides with jaunty yellow flowers, next to gold-edged Roman Catholic Bibles. Ave Maria, it is still Colalique. It is still Oshun. It is still Yage Medicina. It is still Obia. It is still Benin Voudon, clad in crisp white filaments and wrapped in fire. This one is called I Give different answers. Those who don't know ask, are you mixed? Is your father white? Is your mother white? What are you then? Where are you from? I mean, where are your people from? Those who know ask, are you Caribbean? Which island? We laugh, we sing the same interloper song. Those who know ask, are you Colombian? My Spanish professor taught me, with eggshell white skin and hair as dark as dreams. She says, eres colombiana, you are a mestiza like me. This next one is called Brown Girl. I didn't grow up hating myself. Grew up on my island hearing, you were such a nice brown skinned girl. Nice brown, nice skin, nice girl. I was nice and brown. I was nice skinned. I was a nice girl until I came to Brooklyn. I became tough and black. I became unnice, imitation of a hard-mouthed New Yorican. Brown became bad. Girl became bad. Here, skin is a problem. This one took me a long time to write. This next one is Angela Davis was in my car, and she really was. I bought a new brown leopard pattern seat covers for my dog chewed interior to drive her from the college lecture hall to her hotel. She is redwood tree tall. She walks like a battleship cutting through ice. Her voice fills the car. Her sentences trail off at the end and keeps on trailing. Have you heard Angela Davis speak? Her vowels swoop down and then curve up and dissipate like an Italian, but not like an Italian, like she's from the country of Angela Davis. I took her to the wrong hotel, then to the right hotel. She was supposed to die in prison, but she didn't. She lived. She lived and rose, living and took us with her in her rising, kept on living, kept on rising, keep on rising, kept on taking us, kept on keeping on. Our hands looped around her scarf, threaded through her pockets, our dreams hanging on her jeans. I tell her about my classes. Tell her I write about forgotten women, my mother, my grandmothers. Her voice undulates, rolls, ripples, weaves through my mind. Get on it, girl, she says. She left three soft steel gray hairs on my headrest. If I had the right incantation, I could make my own Angela Davis. This poem was hard to write, and I did write it when the Till movie came out because I couldn't watch it, and I was thinking, why can't I watch it? And this poem helped me to process those feelings. To watch the Till movie, I cannot watch the new Emmett Till movie. It is me always dying in that river. Me calling and calling for my mother as the life is smashed out of me. Me lying in the casket, so chewed up my mother only knows me by my ring. Me receiving my child's masticated corpse. Me clutching red beads and a bobbin lace handkerchief. Me in my black crepe dress, my face on fire from crying. My white passing brother sits on the couch. A promo for the new Emmett Till movie pops up on our TV. He cannot watch. It is him putting a crisp new suit on his dead, bloated son in the most expensive casket. It is still him dying in that car, him getting his eyes gouged out, him covered over as in the dark airless ground in the most expensive casket. My brother finds my face with his haunted slate blue eyes. He asks, "What would you do if it was me in that river?" I say, "I would walk out of this door into God's sunshine and call your name." This poem was recently published by West Trestle Review in their new online edition. So you should check them out if you get the chance. West Trestle Review. Why don't you write about joy? Why do you keep writing about all of this brown girl suffering? Because when my mother was pregnant, fate bathed her in blood. They took both her child in their womb and her womb, though they didn't have to. Because when my mother, when my grandmother came to the Anglo world, they cleaved her name in two. Because my grandmother lost one, then two, then three children, one to death, one to adoption, one to theft. Because my mother was torn from her mother and went crazy. Because my grandmother lost her daughter and went crazy. Because every day us women on this side of the sea, though wedded to our cooking pots, still make bread. Because when you want to feel better, you stand on our necks. Because we still sing with our faces in the loam. Because when we have nothing, we still have ourselves. Because we are beloved to each other. Because every night the sun still falls below the ocean where my people dwell. Because you cannot hear me doesn't mean I'm not singing. So I'll read this one and then one more. This is a fun poem about Zora Neale Thurston, and she is buried in Florida where I live, and I go to visit her every year. Zora Neale Thurston. It's not good for people to be forgotten, especially me. I see y'all come to my grave. I appreciate the candles and the wine and the fake flowers y'all leave. I also appreciate that y'all cleaned up the graveyard so you can see the damn graves. But what about when I was alive? When I was broke as fuck in that old person's home? What about when I was trying to get my last book published? If it wasn't for that gal, no one would know who I was. You know her. She wrote that book, The Color Purple. I appreciate her story about how she found my grave. First of all, she didn't fall into some damn hole, and she wasn't running from snakes. But I'm not mad at her. We writers need our stories, even if they aren't exactly true. The truth is somewhere in between. She did pay to get me a headstone, and I don't have the heart to tell her. The headstone's not exactly over me. I'm a little to the left. And then this will be my last one, The Prettiest Graves. Gather the weight of not having said and place it upon the prettiest graves. Jill Wenderoth. Which are the prettiest graves? The ones tended with fresh flowers, roses, gardenia, oleander. The ones tended with fresh flowers, grass clipped close. The ones with an angel above, weeping, languid, and crestfallen, beraggled over the headstone. Are they any more lovely than the ones with plastic flowers, with the water-stained pictures, the ones with an engraved monster truck, the ones lost beneath twisted vines, bowed over grass, overgrown and forgotten. Thank you.
That was amazing.
Thank you so much.
And I'm so glad you read the poems that really like succinctly explain why I asked question 3. So for folks, if you're new, I tend to send the questions to my guest prior to coming on so that we're prepped for the conversation. And there's a question that I ask about the role of the first person narrator because I love how you assign it, especially in the Zora Neale Hurston poem. So I'm like, when I heard, I was like, yes, this really sums up why I asked the question. So let's go ahead and get started today. So I like to start off the conversation by asking, what is the origin story of your forthcoming poetry collection, Black Mestiza? I'd love to know the story behind the title and also why this book right now.
Girl, you are going for the tea right away.
Yes, I do.
Um, well, I love to write poetry, but I really didn't think I was that good at it. And in my MFA, it was actually a creative nonfiction
Oh,
major. Uh, but I was always skulking around in the poetry classes, and the poetry professors, would help me with my craft and working towards becoming a better poet. So, I wrote a lot, and I entered the Cave Canem chapbook contest. All delusional, I would win, of course, right? Um, but I didn't. But I kept writing and writing, and then I had enough to submit to a full length competition, and was a semifinalist, and I was like, oh, well, maybe this is decent. So I paid more attention to the manuscript, reworked it, put it together again, and sent it back out. And it had been in circulation for about three, well, maybe a few months, and I took it to my mentor, my main mentor, for her to look over it. And I was like, "Girl, let me have it. Just let me have it." With um, this manuscript. And the night before, I couldn't sleep, and I was really annoyed. And I was like, ancestors, tell me what you need to tell me so I can go to sleep because I have to teach tomorrow and I have a meeting. And please, just come on. And what was bothering me was the title of the book. The previous title was Islands Under the Sea, which is all very nice, but what is it really saying? Um, I'm like, that's not the right title. And so I saw it right there in the night, middle of the night, trying to sleep. I said, the title should be Black Mestiza. And mestiza in the Latin American world means mixed race person. But in terms of blackness, it's problematic. Like, blackness is just problematic always, right? Um, and I had a 20-year-old first generation Colombian in my class explain to me that I was not a mestiza because I was black. And black people were not mestizas. It was only Spanish and indigenous. No black people allowed. So that was, of course, her opinion. Where I've been told I was a mestiza from somebody who actually grew up in Colombia. So I disregarded that. But she came on really strong, like when you're an adolescent, you know everything. And so that was in my mind. And also, I have a couple of Latina colleagues, fellow poets that I knew who offered to read for me. And I'm like, oh, yes, everybody read, please. I would love suggestions. And they both had problems with certain poems. And me being, I don't really think about in that context, since it accepted me as a Latina, I wasn't really thinking. I was just very puzzled as to why they had problems with these poems. And I actually got the feedback from them. Oh, you're repeating yourself. You're repeating yourself. I'm like, I'm not repeating myself. And then I finally got it. They had problems with the poems where I was being Black. I could be Latino all I wanted, but don't be too Black though, because that makes us uncomfortable. So I'm like, you know what? We are just gonna throw this Blackness right up into people's face, and we are gonna call this collection Black Mestiza. Um, and actually, when I had that meeting with my mentor, she's like, "Yeah, this title isn't right," and I'm like, "You're right. I got a new title." So that's how that all came about.
See, so for folks, Yael, sorry to like put you out there, but I remember this conversation years ago when I first started Black Writers Read, and people assumed this was automatically an African American platform, I guess because of my identity. And like for some reason, people assume Black is African American. And I'm like, no, it is legit representative of the diaspora. And when I saw you, like when I saw the cover of the book, I saw the title and I looked you up, I was like, I gotta have her on because you literally encapsulate what I want this platform to do. We are legit representative of the diaspora. And for folks who don't remember that lovely, segment of our history, that the Middle Passage, most of it went to Latin America and South America. So of course, there's going to be some Africanness there. And and you have indigenous roots, and when you said that the students said that you couldn't be mestiza, Valencia Aldana, that is like you can't get more Spain than that. I'm like, I I was like, that is legit cities in Spain. Like how I was like, okay. When you said that, so I was like, okay. But like you, like literally, you like I was like, I hope she says yes because you are like what I want Black Writers Read to do is to be about how we, examine and muck up genre, what we do with the canon, and then also too how rich Blackness is. So thank you for writing this book and thank you for giving it the title that you did.
Thank you. I'm just gonna make a real small aside. Listen, I spent my adolescence in Brooklyn. I am Brooklyn. And
Yeah.
I code switch all over the place. Like when I'm in Brooklyn or wherever I am, I always said like I'm hood, I'm ratchet. Don't make me mad because my neck will start going like, what do you mean? So I'm very Black and I'm very comfortable in African American spaces. But sometimes I don't know, like, oh, I'll bring that Latino stuff up in here, because there's a bit of a line. But I'm very comfortable, with all of my different identities.
I love it so much. The poems here are especially rich and bountiful, which for folks, the table of contents is several pages. There's a lot of work in this book, so much. How long did it take you to curate this collection, and which is the earliest poem of Black Mestiza that you wrote?
Girl, your questions are off the chain. Okay, you're like you tapped into sub. You called my ancestors. You're like, let me get her with these questions. Okay, some of these poems are 30 years old. Um, I started writing poetry. First of all, I'm old. Yes, I am that old. Um, while I was in college, and I just wrote to write. I didn't think I was any, good writer or anything. The English professors that saw it, they didn't tell me I was a good writer either. But I just wrote. I wrote a lot, and I went through my old notebooks, and I'm like, these don't seem half bad, but I could be delusional. So I showed them to some professors, and I said, what do you think? They're like, no, these poems, you can touch them up a little bit, but they can go in the book. So the oldest poem in the book is the series Small, Dark, and Moving, um, which really is exactly what it sounds like it's about. It's about being like sort of like an animal, small, dark, and moving. But it's also about being Black, making yourself small so you can fit in, and moving. You're like, so people can't get you because you're moving around. Um, so that's the earliest poem, which is very, very old.
Yeah, because you wrote a lot. And I was like, wow. And I could just tell because it also felt like in reading it, and this can segue nicely into the next question, it felt like I was growing up with you in terms of your poems. Like you can see the breadth of how your writing expanded. And then too, I think I'm gonna hold that question, but it's like I felt like I was really traveling with you through a certain amount of time. And I love how you say you're old. I'm like, no, she is not.
Yeah.
Like,
No, when guys see me on social media and they think, oh, she might be cute, they don't say, hey, how you doing? They go, how old are you? First question, how old are you?
oh
First
my
question, how old are you? I don't answer.
god. Yes. Oh my gosh, I love it. The last line of your first poem, Talisman, I Will Carry You, offers insight to the reader on the role of the narrator. Can you talk about the role of the narrator in the poetry collection and why many of the works included are written in first person, especially the Zora Neale Hurston poem, which I teach Zora Neale Hurston in one of my classes? What does this specific style choice do for subjectivity?
Well, to me, in the collection, I am always in conversation with my mother, because of a lot of reasons. She was a very um, wrapped very tight Black mother who everybody would recognize. They have that type of woman, very strong um, Black woman in their family, where you ask them something and they don't want to do it, or they think it's stupid. They're just looking at you like, and that's your answer. You just walk away. Um, but the way that she transferred our culture, and the what she did, like she would make little altars and things. That's what I was talking about. Or put little pictures and things, and she did things that were very of the African diaspora. Um, but you couldn't tell her that. She'd be like, "Don't be ridiculous." So I'm always unpacking how I grew up, our relationship. So the speaker is very me and her, and I feel like as I'm writing, I'm in conversation. So with the Black person had Bob poem, where I'm like, you know, it's really for us Black people, because we know that, you know, when you see somebody else, especially if they're cute, you don't even, not, like they're looking good. However, church lady, brother, whoever, and you see them and you just like, see you, got you. You know, we do that. So it was like a recognition of us, and our culture. And I am obsessed with Zora Neale Hurston. The moxie of this woman. She's like, listen, I don't care. This is what I'm doing. This is what's happening. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I don't care what y'all think. This is it. And I love how she looks so different in each picture. Like, who is this? This looks like five different people. Who is this woman? And she was it. She knew she was it. And she did all kinds of incredible things that people didn't think a Black person or even a Black woman would do. So I love that story about Alice Walker finding her grave. And I would love Alice Walker to come and be like, listen, girl, that was a real story. Um, but the thing is, they don't know exactly where people are buried there because they haven't done the ground radar to see. So they guessed where she was because it was like a depression. It was just a field. Like Alice Walker was walking to a field, the grass was real high, and she said she fell into a hole and she felt that's where Zora was. They're not sure where the graves are. So she put a headstone over where she thinks she is. So I just embellished on that. And you know, with all her attitude that she had, I gave her some attitude. She'd probably be more articulate than that, but I wanted to give her that attitude in a compact space. Um, and I just like to say y'all. As many times as I can say y'all, I'll say y'all. I just love that.
Yeah. Repetition plays a unique role in Black Mestiza. Can you talk about why the use of repetition and how it engages with the themes of, there was one that I forgot to include here, ritual, identity, genealogy, colonialism, and maternal lineage?
As a poetic device, I just love repetition. And I tell my students when, because I teach intro to poetry and a lot of them don't want to do it. I'm like, when you have no idea, just pick a word or pick a phrase and repeat, repeat, repeat. It automatically makes like a sonic resonance in the poem. Um, and I think that it's so important for our culture to repeat the knowledge that we have because we are very um, forgetful. I mean, look at the state of our culture at the moment, right? People are so happy to forget in one generation. Oh no, and I did it too. I came to America as a teenager, and I'm like, I'm American now. Look at me. I'm wearing little jackets. I'm American. Um, Forget that Caribbean stuff. I don't have a Caribbean accent. So I think the repeating, it has two purposes because I just love the sonic quality of things coming back around and repeating. And I basically, the collection is so that we don't forget. That we don't forget, our ancestors, our first generation women that came over with all of these rituals. They're so important. And I see a distinct line between people that accept their culture and cling to their culture and integrate it into their Americanness and people that reject it. The people for me that reject their culture, they're lost. And they go around attacking everything because they're not grounded, right? Um, but when you've got like a witchy grandmother putting up like her Virgin Mary statue and her little candles and praying for you and all of that. When you give that grandmother grace and accept her and the prayer and the love she's offering you, it's a different type of thing than you reject that. So that's all up in there.
This segues so nicely into the next question. I love how all of this is tying together. You dedicate Black Mestiza to your grandmother, Carmen Aldana Valencia. Can you talk about how and why she shows up in this text and how you were able to access her story and that of your lineage?
Well, that's a whole ball of wax. Um, I was adopted in the Caribbean. Fortunately for me, my adopted mother and I look very similar. So, you know, nobody was coming for us there. Um, but I know my birth mother, and my birth mother always had, and the dog is chiming in now. Um,
Yes.
Always would tell all these stories, that weren't true. So you just didn't know what to believe. So you just didn't really believe her. But she was always talking about um, her mother, who is from Colombia, and I didn't believe her because she used to make things up to make herself more exotic, more interesting, this and that, blah blah blah. So I did a DNA thing, and I was not expecting anything. I expected British and African, but then the maternal line was indigenous, solid indigenous from Colombia. Yeah, that was me. I was like, what? So from that, and the DNA led me to other members of my family, the Aldana family, in Trinidad and Tobago, and I found out about how Carmen came out of Colombia to Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean, which nobody really knows why. Because if she was in this teeny tiny town, and then she just up and went to like a Caribbean island where they don't speak Spanish, so still trying to uncover that story. But by the time I did all that, she'd passed away, and I just feel very indebted to her and driven to tell her story because she did have 6 children. One died, one was adopted out. She only raised 2. Um, and one, the story goes, the father was angry with her, took the child to another island, and because she was very fair, like had her adopted by an upper class family, which was my birth mother. And that really destroyed her. That experience really destroyed her experience, her life. So I want, can you imagine losing 4 children and one of
Wow.
them is just taken from you and is out there and you can't find them? So I wanted to honor her in her story, and I'm still working on finding out more about her to write about her.
Wow. Wow. My God. Like, it's just so interesting, like how all of this is just falling into line together. It's like literally, I may have tapped into your ancestors to be like,
You
can y'all
probably
help me?
did.
I'm like, wow, I'm loving this so far. Prior to having our guest on Black Writers Read, we ask them each why they write. Here's what you wrote. I write because I have to. It is an expression of my human existence. I wrote in some way almost all my life. I never thought I would be a writer. I wrote creatively to express myself and work through things in my head. I was on a part to be professor in anthropology, which I think is really interesting. When I had a come to Jesus moment with my academic advisor, she informed me I was a creative writer and that is what I need to do. Writers are the conscience of society and we lead change. Toni Morrison saw how creative people are a catalyst for change. We have to keep expressing ourselves and advocating for others. It is important to share my work because inspiration is like a chain. For instance, I was inspired by Toni Morrison, and then someone else inspired to me, and then someone else inspired by them. There's a famous poem, Why Bother, by Sean Thomas Doherty, because right now is someone out there with a wound in exact shape of your words. I couldn't say it better. How have Toni Morrison, who is like just I want to be like her so bad. And like take after her in terms of like shepherding other writers and then writing myself. How have Toni Morrison and Sean Thomas Doherty fed your soul and influenced your work?
Oh, geez. Toni Morrison is like the sun, you can sort of afraid to look in her direction because she's so spectacular. But I think that the way she was, and if you look at interviews with her, she's just, the people will be asking her all these typical questions. She's like, "Why are you asking me that question? Can't you come up with something better?" She she was just not having it. Um, my favorite Toni Morrison story is when Oprah called her for permission to do The Color Purple. She said to Oprah, "How'd you get my number? It's unlisted." I mean, Oprah's calling
Yes.
you. But she just was excellent. And she was like, this is what I'm going to say. This is the truth. And however it goes, it goes. Has nothing to do with me, how people take it. I'm going to say what I say. And she was accused of not portraying Black men in a positive light. But I think she had incredible sympathy for Black men and women across the spectrum. And she just showed the incredible difficulty of Black life and the consequences of that and people struggling um, with that. So when I was writing my thesis, which was the first version of my memoir, I was absolutely paralyzed with fear. And I could barely even type. I was like so frightened. And my thesis advisor, which was this incredible black woman, like my mother, she would tilt her head down, look at me over her glasses, and she was trying to get in touch with me, see what's going on. I'm like, I don't know if I can finish. Oh my gosh, I might fail. My first time in my life, I might fail. And I had this dream, and I was in a church, and Toni Morrison was preaching. And then we all walked out together of the church, and somehow I was in the front with her, and she looked at me and she said, "Girl, if you want to come to my church, you need to come on." And I woke up and I'm like, "Okay, we're coming on. We're coming on. We're coming on." And I'm like, Toni Morrison came to me in the dream. I gotta do this. I gotta do it. So I busted a move on that, my thesis, and I finished. She was still alive at that point. But you know, what she was able to accomplish with the Pulitzer Prize and the Nobel Prize, besides being a black writer, just is like, this is what you can do. So don't make yourself small and put your head down and go. Don't worry about it. Just go. And in terms of Sean Thomas Dougherty, that poem, whenever I get fed up and I'm like, I'm not finding success and I can't, I'm not, it's not going the way I want. I mean, to me, it's like, I'm not, I'm writing for myself, but I'm also writing for other people. And I think about like a girl in Brooklyn where I grew up as a teenager who is creative and everybody is telling her to be a dental hygienist or whatever, and to receive that spark of creativity where she can see a path for herself. Because the people telling you to be a dental hygienist, they're not creative. They haven't, busted out of anything. They're afraid. That is fear talking. You can look at the people that made it, how they made it, whether they're teaching, whether, however they're making their creativity work for them. They will never tell you don't try. It's the people that are afraid. They'll tell you don't try. So that's how those two people fuel my creativity.
Nice. And then with your while you write, thank you for sharing that you once wanted to become an anthropology professor, which one of my besties, I cannot wait to share with her your book. She also wants to write too. She's an anthropology professor, and I'm like, Vanessa, just do it, just write. And I think she's going to pick up a lot from your book. So I can actually see like how that is demonstrated in the poetry in this book. So, is it fair to say that the book pays homage to the younger Yael and her dream of working in anthropology? And if so, how does this poetry collection contribute to that type of inquiry?
Well, I wasn't that young when I decided to be an anthropology professor, and it was a bit of a cop out because I'm like, I want a nice cushy job, and then I want to be able to write about my family. That's what I want to do. And the my thesis director was the head of anthropology um, at Florida Atlantic University. So basically, I came to her because I'm always delusional and always, I'm like, I'm going to be the best. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to apply to these anthropology um, programs, and they were the top in the country. And she looked at me and she's like, "You're not getting in here." And I says, "Oh, you don't know who I am," type of thing. Um, and that, yeah, she gave me like a verbal beat down, where I started crying. Um, And she's like, "Girl, get it together. Like if you're gonna be successful, you write really well, you want to preserve that. That's not the way. I've been that way. But it was really valuable to work with her because there's so much I didn't understand. Like when I was adopted, my older sister, who was my social worker, and I was like 3 months, and they needed a place for me because my birth mother, who was 17 years old, couldn't handle me. I was crying a lot. and nobody wanted a little baby. Brought me home to her mother, and basically was like, "Can you, will you take this child? I don't know what to do with her." And my mother was like, looked at me, and she's like, "Yeah, I'll take her. What do you have for her?" you know. And I can never understand that moment where, some random child's walking up on your doorstep, someone hands you a baby and says, "Will you look after this baby?" Now, granted, it was only supposed to be probably for months, turned into forever. But my anthropology professor, she was like, "Okay, well, that is part of a Black experience. That's from the diaspora where women would watch each other's babies as they were doing other things. Also, in slavery, you know, women are being pulled apart from their families, and you're just taking care of the children." And I read this book, can't remember the exact title of it, but I think it was called All My Kin, about that specifically, that in the Black community, as Black women work, because the concept of staying at home with your kids as a Black woman, you are working. Um, so you're handing your child off to someone who can take care of them, and sometimes, different people. So she helped me to understand that behavior, and why my mother was open to do that, because uh, it's it's a part of our history. So that was my first introduction to disseminating what my mother was doing, with her behavior, and also passing down the ancestors. This is a documented behavior among Caribbean women, that they pass the lineage of the women down the female line. It's called praise song. And I did not grow up with my great grandmother or my great adopted grandmother, because my mother is my adopted mother. That's what I consider my mother, Granny Titi. But my mother spoke about her so much that I couldn't imagine that I'd never met her. But she was dead 20 years before I came along. So it's this process of passing down ancestors and their stories that's very present in the Caribbean community, and I've seen it in African American community as well. So she gave me a lot of insight into behaviors that I was sort of like, I kind of don't understand why that happens. Um, but also, I have never had a Black person, after they find out I was adopted, because it's always something very specific people say, like, "Where's your real mother?" I have never been asked that by a Black person, because I think there is this history of Black children living with other family members and being taken care of. So there's not this like rigid concept of like, your mother is from your blood and that's it. You have a fake mother. I don't know if you knew that, your mother's fake, but let me help you understand that. So all of that comes to play, because all of that knowledge is, up here.
Mm. Thinking back to the question, oh no, I'm skipping one. Sorry. Your literary voice takes the form of poetry and prose, both fiction and nonfiction. And I love hearing, because I didn't realize your MFA was in creative nonfiction. So I'd love for you to share some advantages and challenges of poetry and prose, and why it is important to you to write in both.
Just because I always have. I mean, my initial inspirations were Margaret Atwood and Sandra Cisneros. They're multi-genre writers. They wrote novels, poetry, creative nonfiction. So I just thought that's what a writer did. So I would like read what they wrote, and then I'd write my own little thing. It really surprised me when I went to my MFA and people were like, "What's your genre? Where are you fitting?" And I'm like,
Mm.
"I'm a writer." And they're like, "No, no, that's not good enough. What is your major?" Uh, so that's just what I thought writers did. So I always wrote across genres. I find it very hard to believe that Toni Morrison's not a poet, because her writing is very poetic. Um, and I'm gonna die on that hill that she's a poetic writer. Uh, and she wrote, you know, fiction and nonfiction, and I poetic poetic narrative. So that to
Yeah.
me, that's just what you did, and that's just what I did. It never occurred to me to do anything else.
I think my girl Courtney will agree with you about Toni Morrison. She's such a huge Toni Morrison fan. She met Toni Morrison, got her art and got her autograph and had it tattooed on her, I believe, after she passed, I think. Or before she passed, and
Mm,
then added something else. Yeah, huge Toni. She
mhm.
teaches, it was in her dissertation, loves Toni Morrison. So, thinking back to the question about Black Mestiza as an anthropological inquiry, as a Caribbean Afro Latinx woman, author with Indigenous Black and white roots living in the United States at this time, how do you see your work contributing to the larger literary canon?
Well,
Yes.
um, one I've seen myself three times really in literature. First one was from Margaret Atwood's work because she is just the weirdest thing in the world. She is just weird, crazed, neurotic, which I am, all of them. So I didn't know you could be like that and write weirdly. Um, and then I read Toni Morrison at the same time, but I was so like startled by the power. I read Beloved first. It wasn't something I thought I could do because it was such an amazing thing. But it always remained in my mind, you know, as inspiration. But the second time I saw myself was when I read Gloria Anzaldua's Borderlands, and talking about her, one of the things that her writing centers on is called the new mestiza, where the mestiza basically absorbs all of her origins and accepts it, and you know, goes becomes something else. So she's no longer like, you know, the daughter of the raped slave and the conquistador origin. She's something new. She's become something new from that. Um, and my my work uses her really as a base because she showed me how you can be all these different parts and yet bring it all together into work. So I've been very lucky, and I've attended the Gloria Anzaldúa conference twice, and once as a scholar, this last time with my creative work. And Anzaldúa scholars have already picked up on this book and have been writing about it in terms of the multiplicity that um, she brought into scholarship. My goal is to have this book taught because I think that our society is very married to binaries. Like,
Yep.
what are you here? Let me know what you are so I can process how I'm going to think about you. And there's a lot of people that their identities, it doesn't have to be ethnic, really are multiple. So I think it's an example of how you live with multiple identities, you know, happily, and to allow people to see that in existence, because the narrative is that since I have, or the traditional narrative that I'm supposed to fit in is, since I have all of these different identities in my life, I'm supposed to be struggling. I'm supposed to be on a struggle bus, you know, with all, oh, I don't know, do I identify this way or that way? And oh, I have a problem with this ancestor, this and that. You know, it's like, and I'm not struggling. I'm very happy with the integration. I'm happy not to stand in one place, you know, to move around. And I think Black people do that naturally because when we're with each other, we're like one way, like, hey, girl. But when we're out and about, you know we're being looked at in another way. So then our behavior changes because of that. So that was my prime to basically do this work and to integrate the different identities as they came to me. So I would like my work to be out there for other people to discover it and be like, oh, okay, well, I don't have to be, you know, just this or that. I can multiple, and I can be at peace. I don't have to be struggling to pick one or do this or do that. Um, so I'm very happy that Ansel Dual Scholars have picked up on this book, but I'm hoping that it'll contribute wide in a wider way um, to literature and hopefully anthropology. That would be great.
Yes. Yes. So I'm glad you mentioned about binaries and how dangerous they are. And I got this from dear friend Gabriella, where it's like we need to live in a world of yes and. And I tell that to my students
Mhm.
because I'm like, binaries, it creates a good and a bad. It creates a weird hierarchy where you always have someone who will always be less than and
Yes.
not, and I'm like, no, we can't exist. And I'm like, I like existing in a world of yes and Gabriella, thank you for giving me that a couple of years ago, the yes and. And then also too, your book, when it comes out in January, I will be buying copies and it will be added to the Black Writers Reads bookshelves, which are at different colleges throughout Connecticut and Western Mass. So that's a start in terms of getting it into the hands of students.
Yay! Ooh, Western Mass. Where?
So there is a bookshelf at Holyoke Community College, which is an HSI. And
Mm.
then it is at where I teach, which I saw we had this connection when I looked you up. So I teach at the Bar Michael College in Holyoke, which is out of the Care Center. And we used to have a unique tie to Simon's Rock. And I was like, oh,
Oh,
she went there
okay.
for
Yeah.
undergrad. Yeah.
Yeah, that one.
And yeah, yeah, yes,
We're
exactly. Yes.
we're weird over
And I'm hoping to get a shelf at I now teach at Springfield Technical Community College, so I'm putting it out there. So I'm hoping I can get a shelf there as well. And the next there's a shelf at Connecticut State, because they just changed their names, Connecticut State Community College, Assuntuck campus in Enfield, Connecticut. So the right now I have 3 places and I'm looking to create a couple more. So know that your book will be in hands of students when it comes out in January.
Yay. I'm working on having an event at Simon's Rock, so I'll definitely let you know because then I'll be in your geographical area.
Yes, I would love to meet you in person.
That would be
Yeah,
amazing.
that would be so great. And to close this out, what is next for you, and how can the Black Writers Read community support you on this journey?
Buy my book.
Yes.
For an independent book, if you hit 5,000, you have like hit gold. So I'm determined to sell 5,000 books because then you go into a second printing. You see, woohoo! Um, so I don't want to just sell books to sell books, though. I think that this is really valuable to reach people and really promote acceptance wherever you are. So, you know, follow me on my socials. And if you can buy my book, if you can't buy my book, share my book.
Or get
Next
it
for
in
me,
libraries.
get it at the library. Next for me, I have my memoir, which covers my first 16 years. So I'm looking for an agent. Anybody knows an agent that might be interested? Or actually, agent in the UK. I gave up on the US because the Caribbean diaspora in the UK and Canada is very strong. So I think I'll start there. I think I'll have less of an uphill battle. Um, I'm being fancy. I'm being thinking that I can go with like a bigger press. But, if you have a lead on an agent, let me know. And next, I'm going to start working on this book about my grandmother to interview family members and find out why she came to Trinidad. And I've got to go to Chinacota because the ancestry records are not from Latin America, so I have to physically go there. My Spanglish is strong, but my Spanish is not great. So I've got to get that together so I can go and I can read and do research on her to find out what what was the deal. Why did she go, from the middle of nowhere to Caribbean island where she never learned to speak English properly, which I love because she was an English speaking country. So yeah, next is to do the Carmen book, and it's not going to be nonfiction because I don't think there's really enough about her. So it'll be like inspired by her story. It'll be a novel.
Wow. Nice. So, Yael, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm so fortunate to have had this conversation with you.
Thank you. It's my honor, and I'm so glad to kick off your new season.
Yay.
Best best energy and love to the rest of the season. I'll be happy to promote your upcoming talks on my socials, so people can get more exposure to really the wonderful people doing all kinds of great things out there.
Thank you so much. So, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. So great chatting with you today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for the first episode of season 5 of Black Writers Read. So, for folks, I have an event coming up, a virtual event that is scheduled for Monday, September 9th. We still have spots remaining for the event representing place, time, and community, which will feature Danielle LaGros George and Jonathan Todd. We will be on Zoom webinar. Visit blackwritersread.com and click on events to register. So I will be back next week for a live stream conversation on Sunday, September 15th. I will be chatting with Dr. Ramon Johnson about his online workshop writing series. I believe it's called Literary Hoodoo, and that will start in October. And he's someone else that I met on Instagram, and I'm very excited to have him on next week. So support Black Writers Read by subscribing to my YouTube channel or the audio podcast, which is available on Apple Podcasts, iHeart, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, which I believe Google Podcasts is going to be suspending soon. But wherever you get your podcasts, Black Writers Read is there. And while you're there, please drop a review of Black Writers Read on one of these platforms. By supporting us as a subscriber or a reviewer, you're growing our community, which can lead to future sponsorships, ding, 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 and longer term financial sustainability of the platform. So thank you to everyone for spending your afternoon with us, and more importantly, for ensuring that Black authors continue to matter. See you next week.